Hello, my name is Jeremy Gutierrez. I am the student writer with CHAS Marketing, and I'm here today with Bella Merlin, one of our esteemed TFDP professors. And today we're going to talk about her show, Tilly Nobody, and some of the work that she's done with it and that she will do with it in the future. Hello, Bella.
Hello, Jeremy.
So first off, can you tell us what is Tilly Nobody and where did the idea come from?
So Tilly Nobody is a one-person show with 5 cabaret songs, original cabaret songs, and it's set in a sort of magical space. So a young woman who is on the brink of collapse in a coercive relationship swallows poison, and the play takes place in the 3 days that she was, in essence, recovering for, or the poison was coursing through her body. So I call it a magical space because time, age, location keep changing in the course of the play. And the idea really came from, once upon a time, there was a very famous playwright called Frank Wedekind. And he wrote a couple of famous plays. One is Spring Awakening, which became a musical, and the other was a couple of plays that were put together called Lulu. And in my 20s, I was playing Lulu in a theatre in London, and while I was doing the research, I came across this book called Lulu, The Role of My Life, by somebody called Tilly Wedekind. And I was curious, it turns out this was his wife. And the idea that the role of Lulu might be the role of her life. I thought she was going to say how this made her famous and successful and fantastic. Instead, I discovered that in the course of their marriage, he turned her into Lulu. Wow. And Lulu is this kind of mercurial character, very predatory in a way. She has gay relationships, straight relationships. She's all things to all people. Mm-hmm. So as I began to realize that Frank had turned his own wife into this character in their life, I was really curious about that. And many people, particularly in Europe, have heard of Frank. They've certainly heard of Spring Awakening. Nobody's heard of Tilly.
Right.
And I wanted to give her voice a chance to express itself.
Of course.
You know, all relationships are complicated.
Right.
There's always going to be some sort of power imbalance, whether it's a financial one, whether it's somebody's career is more successful, maybe somebody's more intellectually intelligent, maybe somebody's more emotionally intelligent, but these power imbalances that little by little, if we're not careful, can lead to coercive, abusive environments, relationships. And we're never gonna get away from that until men and women and men and men and women and all different gender identities start understanding how we can each mutually respect each other. Yeah. And I'm very sensitive to how quickly something can become a power struggle. And I don't think that's ever gonna be irrelevant, right, to be honest.
And what does the character of Tilly mean to you?
I kind of love her. I think I'm a bit in love with her. There's something about, I mean, you might be able to see that the book's actually in German. Right. And I didn't have great German skills, but I spent a long time, like 10 years, translating this. And as I was translating it, I was getting more and more into her mind, into her emotions, into her romances and her family life. And I felt a certain responsibility at the end to honor and respect. I like doing fact-based plays and films. It's great if it's based on a thing that happened or a person that lived. And we took this, or at least we presented the film version of this play at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women in 2024. And shortly before we presented it, the co-host of the event said to me, "So Bella, why are you interested in Tilly's life?" And I went, "Oh, I don't really need to go into that." She went, "Well, I think you do, actually." And I said, "Okay, in my 20s, I was in a very coercive relationship. In fact, with a writer who had done the version of Lulu that we did in London."
I see.
An older guy, a playwright. I was on the brink of my career taking off. It was a vulnerable situation. Right. And it became very, very violent, psychologically and emotionally. And I think part of me wanting to tell Tilly's story is to basically say many of us have murky experiences
Right.
that we can't quite make sense of, but somehow the language and the structure that a script, be it for television, theatre, film, provides, helps us create structure and language for these very complex, I'll be honest, kind of shameful. I was ashamed of who I was in my 20s. I didn't really know who I was, and I allowed myself to be very coerced. So I feel a responsibility to Tilly. I feel a responsibility to sharing stories
Yeah.
with others who might be navigating complicated things. And for me, live theatre is, the way I say it, it could be the last bastion of heartbeat to heartbeat connection, especially as AI comes online more and more. And I think what we can do when we're all brought together to share a story is really feel the heartbeats between us and how impactful it can be to tell our stories, share our stories. And we had a question and answer after the United Nations event, and we were also invited to South Korea, and we did the play in South Korea, and we had a question and answer afterwards. And on both occasions, daring to share my connection to Tilly's story ignited a freedom in people to start to share their stories. And it was very humbling, very moving, and very empowering.
Right. No, that's beautiful.
I always think of acting as being a little bit like creating a flute, a really well-made flute, into which the words of the writer come and the breath of the body mixes with those, and out of that flute comes the music of the play. So I feel my job is to connect to Tilly's material, but then kind of get out of the way.
Right.
So just to let the words of the piece come into my imagination, my body, but really it's in the audience that it needs to land. So
Yes.
I connect and then get out of the way, if that makes sense. In many respects, I feel as though I'm a bit of a captain of a ship, that all I'm doing is, there's all this cargo, and that the cargo comes from Frank's life, Tilly's life, whatever I'm feeding from my own autobiography. I mean, Frank was a playwright, so into Tilly Nobody, there are elements of his plays. When I talked earlier about it's, kind of a magical space, we play a lot actually with the aesthetics of German Expressionist theatre. So German Expressionism had big shadows and big gestures, and if you think about the early horror movies, actually, like Nosferatu, that kind of that's the vibe of some of what we're after here. Okay. So when I feel that I'm kind of less of a writer and more of a collaborator with Tilly and Frank, and also my my director, Miles Anderson, who is also my husband, so also read every single draft of this as we were going along, and actually created quite a lot of the aesthetics. It was his idea that it should be set in a circus.
As a one-woman show, Tilly Nobody is a very different form of theater than what most people are familiar with. When you were first writing the play, did you intend for it to be performed that way? And how did it affect the way that you view and worked with the material?
I always knew it was going to be a solo show, and that was kind of a practical thing. When I first came to the US, I didn't have a work permit that would allow me to work outside of the university. So I was on a green card attached to the university. So I knew it was going to be hard for me to get other acting work till I'd got my citizenship and my union membership. So I thought, well, I want something that isn't reliant on me needing other people. So it was pragmatic. And at the same time, this idea of Tilly being a nobody who becomes a somebody, there's something about the solo figure finding herself. And as I say, it's not really one person, there's puppets. And the puppets, I want to just say a little bit about those. I knew I wanted a puppet of Frank and a puppet of Tilly to appear about halfway through the play, partly because there's a limit to how much people want to listen to one voice and look at one face. And that can be a challenge with a one-person show. It's like, yeah, okay, after 30 minutes, I've heard enough. And so part of it was I wanted to give another face to Frank and Tilly. But also, I wanted to be able to, just as Frank manipulates Tilly throughout their life, I, as big Tilly, so to speak, wanted to be able to manipulate Frank, so that there's a moment when I cradle him like a baby, and it's like, oh, little Frank, you know, because I wanted to show that he needed her as much as she needed him. But also with the little Tilly puppet, so I talk about big Tilly and little Tilly, I could show how Tilly's psychology was fragmenting, because big Tilly can start to talk to little Tilly. So, you know, we have conversations where we're sort of talking to each other, and that is a kind of analogy for the fact that her whole psychology was falling to bits. Yeah. So I always knew it would be so low, but I never thought it would just be one. So yes, the audience is vital. And we took the show to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe this past summer, which is the world's biggest live performance festival. And so there's 3,500 shows happening at the same time. So that's a lot of shows competing for a lot of audience, or a few audience, because, you know, there's not as many audience members as you need for 3,500 shows. So often I was playing, twice I played to audiences that had 4 people in it. And I loved it. It was so intimate, and it felt such a vibrant dialogue. Now, it's great, yeah, of course I don't really want to only play to 4 people too often, but it didn't make a difference whether it was, you know, a half full house or a tiny weeny audience, because there's so many different elements in here, thanks in many respects to Miles Anderson, the director, where sometimes the audience are going to laugh a lot, because Tilly's witty. Yeah. That's why I liked her. She's very witty, and she's coquettish, and she's manipulative, and she's strategic. And then she has this tragedy of getting to the point where she doesn't want to live anymore, and then rebuilding her life and her confidence. So sometimes they'll laugh more. There's one moment, I'm not going to give it away too much, but my husband came up with this particular moment, and it's quite a challenge to me. Put it this way. There's a circus ball. There is a lute, and there's an actor. The 3 come together at one point, and I hear the audience gasp, and it's so much fun. So I've always loved songwriting. I actually thought I was going to be a singer-songwriter, not an actor, in my very early career, because I love the way that, like a poem, a song has to condense lots of ideas into something very small and consumable, if you like, manageable. And I love how the melody then enables a kind of emotional undercurrent to the poem, if you like. So that's always been something I've loved. Frank was a balladeer. Frank Wedekind was part of a political theatre group. They were a bit underground. They were called the 11 Executioners, and they were basically scything their way through German politics of the time. They were quite mischievous, and they had these very bold characters. One, I think, was called something like Ernst Blood or something like that. You know, they were quite sort of macabre, and, you know, and they were scything through regulations and rules. And so there's many pictures of him with his lute singing these cabaret songs. So it just made sense to echo what he did, married with what I like doing. I began the research in 2009, so a long time ago. And then we did the first iteration in 2010. And then I didn't do it for 12 years. Wow. Other things had come along. At that point, our set, which was designed by a wonderful set designer called John Iacovelli, who did a lot in Los Angeles at the time, was just too big to take anywhere. So I didn't do it. So I didn't visit it again until 2022, when a company on the East Coast, Shakespeare & Company, invited me to be part of their summer season with the play. So now my body was 12 years older, which made the resonance of the play feel 12 years different. Right. So I edited a few of the bits, thinking, I don't think I should be doing that anymore. And obviously that's 2022, and now 2026, that's another 4 years. Right. So it constantly changes as my understanding of how Tilly's reflection back on her life shifted. We're actually taking it to Munich, the Ludwig Maximilian University is celebrating 100 years of having a theatre department. And our sound designer, David Rösner, is a professor there, as I mentioned. And so we've been invited to take it to be part of the week-long celebrations of the theatre department. When I first did it in 2010, and then I put a recording of it, UCTV put a recording of it online, within about a month, a director in Ireland said, "We want to put this on." And at that time, I was so territorial about it.
Yes.
I was no, I'm not ready for that yet. And then I didn't do it for 12 years. And our producers, our UK producers, are suggesting we publish the script as part of the program for the London 3 weeks. I don't know if that will come to pass. I'm really intrigued by that idea. So that may happen. And there is an online recording that
Yes.
I percolate out every so often. So, and I want to, the point is, live theatre is just so intoxicating.
Yes.
And I try and encourage my students, one of whom is here, to really enjoy and relish that actor-audience relationship. It's special.
Definitely.
Please do come and join me March 6th at 8 p.m, March 7th at 2 p.m, completely free in Arts 113 here at the University of California, Riverside. Thank you so much.